Amanda Mansfield, and this is a role that she plays on the Ghost Walks. If you haven't been on the Ghost Walk in Wolfville, that just gives you an extra bit of incentive to go and see what it's all about, because believe it or not, she's not the only character. I'm not sure how Mona would have felt that way, but at least she gets to have the star billing. My name is Andrea Hill-Lair. I am a graduate of Acadia. In fact, I liked it so much after I finished my BA that I actually went on to get a master's in English, and I came back and did a master's in education. Not only that, I've been a student here, I've been staff, and I've been faculty. So, this is a familiar room to me. Mona Parsons, I came across the story actually when I was working on my master's thesis, and I am by nature attention deficit, and I was working on my thesis and trying to be a disciplined researcher and scholar, and I came across this, just articles, looking at articles. I was doing theater history actually, and I came across this one piece in the Acadia Bulletin that mentioned in September 1945 how this ex-Acadia woman had been found safe at the end of the war after having been a prisoner of war for nearly 4 years. I couldn't believe it. I went to Pat Townsend in the archives and said, show me the stuff, like there's gotta be stuff, ex-Acadia? You know, and she looked at me and said, you know, the name is familiar, but you'll have to go to the Wolfville Historical Society to get more information. So I eagerly sought out the Wolfville Historical Society. Robbins Elliott was my contact, and he said to me, yes, a lot of us remember her, but nothing's ever been done. No book has been written, no movie has been made, no documentary. And he made it his life's purpose, in a way, one of his life purposes, to make sure that I got access to the information I needed. So the first stop was to write a play about Mona called The Bitterest Time. Friend Sarah Blencorn and some other friends, we created this play not because we had information and knew what we were talking about, but in the hope that, human nature being what it is, we'd produce the play and people would just flock to us to tell us what we'd got wrong, what we'd missed. Boy, were we disappointed in that respect. But how we were not disappointed was the impact that this story had on people. We went to the Fringe Festival, and I'll never forget the first night of the performance. There were 7 people, 6 of whom were sitting in the front, and in the back was somebody from the Chronicle Herald who was covering the story. Now, 5 of the 6 were actually audience. The 6th guy was a veteran who'd actually been in Holland, like my dad, like Robbins Elliott, had been there at the end of the war. And he couldn't believe he'd never heard this story before. So he just sat there. He said, my jaw was just hanging open most of the time going, I don't believe I don't know this story. Anyway, at the end of it, 2 of the people were from Holland. And one woman's fiance had been a prisoner of war. So she had tears in her eyes at the end when she came up and said, thank you for telling this story. 2 others were from Newfoundland, from Theatre Newfoundland, and they were preparing to do that fall, Billy Bishop Goes to War. And they said, boy, I'll tell you, if we'd known this existed, we wouldn't be doing Billy Bishop, we'd be doing Mona Parsons. And I think in that instance, I thought, you know what, it's gonna be my life's job to make sure that her name and that image is as well known as Billy Bishop's, because though this woman never wore a uniform, never carried a gun, she was willing to put everything she believed in on the line to stake her life on it for freedom, for justice, and she nearly paid with that life, as you heard in Amanda's story. So that began the search. And I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Robbins Elliott, who is unfortunately no longer here, but I know he's listening. Because he was the one who managed to get the funds, and I believe he paid a lot out of his own pocket for me to go to Holland, because I knew there was only so much I could get here, and the people, including the woman she'd escaped with, was in Holland. And so that began that section. I was over there 3 times doing research. But let me getting a bit ahead of myself. Mona was born to Mary Keith and Norval Parsons. Now, Norval, as you can see, is in a uniform. I love this picture because, think about it. You know, we've had Afghanistan, and we've seen people divided about exactly whether we should be there, why we're there, whether this is a worthy cause, a noble cause, whether it's just a waste of life. But in World War I, it was very much a matter of honor for many people to sign up. Didn't think of it. It was the big adventure for the younger men. And for the older men, they kind of wanted to get a little piece of this, and Norval was no different. Now, he was part of a reserve unit, and when the war came along, he was actually a little too old to enlist. So he just deducted a couple of years off his age, went and signed up, and of course his two sons, now the name escapes me, Gwyn and Ross, signed up as well. Now, Mona was 15, war broke out. She was born 1901. This is her actually living in Middleton. She's seated on the left with some friends. She attended the McDonald's Consolidated School, which is now the museum in Middleton. But when she was 10, there was a huge fire, and her father's business, the Parsons Elliott Company, burned to the ground. And so he looked at this as possibly an opportunity to start elsewhere. He moved to Wolfville, and his occupation on the census is listed by Times businessman, but also stockbroker. So he was in investments, not exactly a gentleman of leisure, but certainly a man of means. And Mona was the only surviving daughter and the youngest child. So she was doted on just a little bit. She was daddy's little girl. And as she grew up, she took on some of her father's interests, horticulture. She loved gardening and everything that her father did. In fact, there's a little bit of affectation, but a great deal of affection that for the rest of his life, Mona referred to him as the Colonel, which was the rank that he attained during the First World War.